whose book, God in the Pandemic, I just read. I included an interview in the links. Some of you might have seen that. Really worth looking at if you haven't. I don't agree with N.T. Wright on everything. He's more theologically conservative, I suppose, than I am. But very wise and very well read. And one thing he says is early Christians tended not to take it as a sign of the end times, because Jesus warns explicitly against that, right? There will be wars and rumors of wars, but the end is not yet. Of that day and hour, no one knows, not even the angels in heaven, not even God's Son, but God alone knows, right? So Jesus denied that even he knew, what was the sign of the end times. So they didn't look at it that way. The wiser ones, at least, also, I don't think looked at it as judgment particularly, because they knew, in colloquial terms, that shit happens. And the whole book of Job is about that, right? And many of the Psalms of lament are about that. Here we are suffering, and yet, as far as we can tell, we did nothing to deserve this. And then it becomes a lament and a plea to God to intervene, but not an attempt to discern in this thing too readily the will of God or something. I think that's something that we need to be on guard against, and probably particularly our conservative Christian friends who tend to be prone to this. That's not a very biblical view. And what N.T. Wright says in a positive sense is that it's not plague but famine. I think it's in Acts 11. There emerges a famine in maybe it was the 40s or so of the Common Era, and the Christians in question in Antioch were not asking, why is God punishing us, or what is this a sign of? They asked, who is in trouble, and what can we do to help? Right? Mm-hmm. There's a danger in wanting, as a person of faith, to channel the will of God as if we know. And both Brueggemann and N.T. Wright say our first job is to lament, simply to lament and to pray, not to pass judgment, not to leap to conclusions, but that something new might come out of that process, as it did for the ancient Jews, in their laments over the loss of Jerusalem in the Book of Lamentations and so on. New things can and do come out of that. We don't always know what those things will be, but our role is to live in faith and hope. Sometimes not even knowing what we're to hope for, but to move forward in openness to what God might be doing.
So I just wonder about the issue of mask wearing again in that regard. That you mentioned about what can we do, and it seems to me that, I'm just wondering what you think. That people are concerned about their rights and things like that, but as community, doesn't what we can do for each other involve our responsibility to each other? And,
precisely, yes.
And so refusing to wear masks isn't a statement of our independence, but our refusal to be part of, to care for each other as community.
Yeah.
Seems like that's something that's missing from discussion. I know there's advertisements on TV and things encouraging people to be responsible and things, but I wonder if there's something that we could say to each other.
Is it possible that some of this is ignorance? I have the impression that these people who are all about my right not to wear a mask think wrongly that the main purpose of wearing a mask is to protect yourself against the virus. Really, it's to protect other people more than that. And I'm not sure that message has gotten through to them. Maybe they're just,
I know.
to use a colloquialism, egotist assholes. But I hope that's not the case. I hope it's ignorance, and that if they do finally get the message, look, this is about taking care of each other. It's not about how paranoid I am. I mean, I understand it a little bit myself when I'm wearing before I got used to the mask, I was thinking, do I look paranoid? And especially if you're the only one. When I went, I've only been to the mall once since this started. I was one of a minority of maybe 5% of people who were wearing masks at that time at the mall. This was before the ordinance went through, so I don't know how it is now. And when I think there's a tipping point, isn't there, where if enough people are doing it, it becomes kind of the new normal. And I don't think we're quite there.
Right.
We're close.
Kurt, I don't think it's all just ignorance. I think there's a strong belief by some of these people that it's a deep government conspiracy, that this is all overblown,
Yeah.
trying to pull something over us.
I keep having to remind myself, you can't underestimate the level of crazy in the, I'm stopping myself from saying conservative movement. This is not a conservative movement. Conservatism embodies positive values. This is a purely negative, crazy thing that has overtaken the Republican Party. It is not a conservative party anymore. It is a radical fringe nutcase, nut job kind of thing that's going on, full of conspiracy theory. And I don't want to rant about this. I'm reminding myself,
So
this country has gone, about a third of this country has gone nuts.
to get back to Bob's point, I'd like to ask Kent and maybe pass, what should responsible people of faith be looking into doing? I mean, Kenton, can I pass that to you? Or?
Sure. Well, first, apologies for joining late because I was having difficulty with my laptop and had to restart the computer and reinstall Zoom. So I'm glad that you started the ball rolling without me.
Thank you so much again.
So I think you've talked a lot about what we as responsible people of faith are doing and can be doing, that we are leading by example. We are wearing our masks. We're trying to be compassionate to those who haven't yet seen the value of that. As Kurt said, there may be as much ignorance or misinformation about the beneficial value of masks as there is the deliberate conspiracy to control us or to somehow take away our freedoms. A couple of other things that I've been thinking of is that there might be an opportunity to have a dialogue with some of our more conservative evangelical friends in the community. And I'm sorry that Andy isn't here, because Andy had been engaging at One World Cafe on a face-to-face basis with some of the folks that were there for Bible studies or theological discussions, and there he is. So
mention his name when he appears.
hello, Andy, and welcome. I was just handed the question of what can people of faith do to promote responsible behavior, social distancing, masking, treating our friends and neighbors with love and respect. And I had mentioned that you've been engaged in some dialogues with some of our more conservative or evangelical friends in the One World face-to-face setting, and wondered if that would be possible in a virtual environment, or would they see Zoom as a complete waste of time, and if we want to talk to them, why can't we just meet the way we always did? So. I'll hand it to Andy, and with the broad question of how do people of faith respond to the pandemic, but maybe more specifically, what can we do to build bridges rather than walls with those who feel differently about this than we do?
Need to unmute.
Need to unmute, Andy.
Unmute. How about now? Can you hear me?
Beautiful.
Okay. It's a very deep and somewhat loaded question, because what I and possibly no one anticipated when I was still back in the days we were meeting, and I was saying at one group or the other, but I talk to evangelical Christians, I go to a Bible study, the same Bible, they seem like nice guys. Why don't we all like build bridges rather than burn them? And then almost instantly after the pandemic struck, the bridges started being burned faster than they could be rebuilt, and the division seemed to actually widen. So the thing that I'm faced with now is this: I'm just basically kind of astonished that I only knew 2 people from Christchurch. There was the one fellow at the Bible study that seemed like a pretty nice fellow. And then this one, the Hebrews theology professor, I got together with him 2 or 3 times just to go through Genesis 3 and Romans 5 and some chapters I was interested in. But what I was just sort of astonished about was how virulently opposed to wearing masks the people at the Christ Church are, and I would assume that that includes those individuals, but I haven't seen them or talked to them. But basically what happened, as soon as the pandemic started, I emailed the fellow who was putting together that interfaith Bible study. There were actually it was a men's group from 5 different churches. I was from First Pres, and there was a fellow from Bridge Bible Fellowship and a guy from Trinity Baptist, more conservative. I emailed him and he just never responded, and I simply have not spoken with an evangelical Christian in Moscow since the pandemic began. They just have not answered my emails, so I don't know what to say.
Yeah.